Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Courtney Townley, a coach, a speaker, a wellness pioneer for midlife women. And I'm thrilled to be getting into this episode because I think it's an underrepresented demographic. Courtney's the voice behind the top rated podcast, Grace and Grit, and the author of the newly released book, The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health. With more than 3 decades in the wellness industry, Courtney helps women embrace this season of their life as their power years, not their decline. And I love that because it feels like a really Eastern philosophy. Certainly in Eastern cultures, as women get older, they're seen as much more wise and powerful rather than in decline. So it's a great perspective to have. Thank you so much for being here, Courtney. I really appreciate you joining the show and I look forward to talking to you a bit more about it.
Well, I so appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to start with a question on the consistency code. And you talk about writing your own manual for health rather than following someone else's. But what does consistency mean to you? And how does that differ from sort of a strict adherence or perfectionism?
Yeah, I love that you're starting with this question. I think that we're conditioned to think of consistency as doing the same thing over and over again until we die,
Yeah.
right? And it requires a level of discipline. The problem with that, when you line it up against health, is that health is a constantly evolving thing because
Mm,
life is constantly evolving. And so, what self care looks like will not always look the same. And so the consistency that I advocate for in the book and really in my work in general is this idea of consistent self honoring. And
yeah.
what it means to honor myself today probably looks a little different than how it looked yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying there aren't going to be some repeatable things, of course, but the dosage and the intensity, and maybe even the way that I go about doing those things is going to change day to day depending on the resources I have to give.
I love that because I think, I talk about this a lot as well in yes, I do a certain amount of gym workouts a week and things like that, but it's about waking up each day and seeing how I feel and actually what of those things I want to be doing. How do you shift that, I
Yeah.
guess, from a mindset perspective of, I just don't feel like it today? So, how do you delineate between keeping consistency and then I
Mhm.
don't feel like it? Because there's sort of this rhetoric of, on social media around forget your feelings, do it anyway. So, sort of, how do you rationalize that?
Yeah. It's such a good clarification because I think that so my company name is Grace and Grit, and
Mm,
it's exactly for this reason. It's not one or the other, it's both that we
mm,
need in order to consistently show up for ourselves. And I will tell you that I've worked with women, I'm sure you have too, who have used grace to the point of almost rationalizing why they don't have to do any
yes.
work.
Yeah.
And I've also worked with women who apply grit to the point of self-destruction.
Mm,
So, living on either end of the spectrum can be hugely problematic.
yeah.
And so I always remind my clients like there's all these sweet spots in the center. And
Yes.
which you need more of is something only you know. Like I can have a bro fitness guy online tell me that I just need to push through,
Yeah.
but he may not have any idea of the reality of perimenopause and the balancing act I'm doing in my life right now between managing aging parents and a kid and running a business and all the things.
Yeah.
And so it's me being radically honest with myself. It's insourcing. Do I really need to back off right now? Or do I need to actually dig my heels in a little deeper and push forward? And
Mm,
and I feel like we have just stopped asking ourselves that question. Like we don't
yeah.
give ourselves that level of radical honesty. And so we look to other people to tell us. Do I need to
Mm,
push harder or do I need to back off? And that's never really going to go well because nobody knows your life the way you do.
yeah. How do you suggest women get in touch with themselves to be able to answer that question? Because I think that can be quite difficult when we are rushing all the time, busy, full lives, caring for different people in our lives, working. Do you have any tools or strategies to allow a woman to connect in with themselves and see how they're feeling and how they get that radical honesty?
Yeah, I mean, I think nobody likes this answer because it counters everything that we're kind of sold, which is
Mm,
we have to like slow down. We
Oh,
have to create more space in our schedule to just be with ourselves and be a little bit introspective. And look, I'm not talking about hours of time. Like, that would be lovely. But even a few touch points in the day of putting your hand on your heart and just asking, like, "Hey, Angie, how you doing today?"
yeah.
And not giving a surface level answer like, "Oh, I'm fine." No, no, Angie, how are you really doing today? Like your
Mm,
best friend wouldn't let you get away with a surface level answer. And I would just encourage women listening to really kind of go to that level with yourself of how, if I'm being absolutely honest with myself in this moment, what is true for me? How am I feeling? How energized am I? What do I need right now in this moment? Do I just need to go pee? Do I need to
yeah,
go eat something? Do I need to just go outside and put my feet in the grass? But
yeah.
we've gotten so far from pausing to check in, and I know how lame that sounds. Like, I wish I
Mm,
had, like, something really sexy to say in answer to this, but I really think it's more of slowing down, reflecting, hand on heart, and, really honoring what you hear.
yeah. Yeah, and, I love you say that because the truth is there isn't a hack to it, and
No.
I do agree. We don't pause. We're never free of distraction because there's our phones in our hands or a television or someone
Yeah,
distracting us. And actually, time in solitude and in silence is really powerful. And it's just, I think I agree with you about finding a way that works for you. For me, it's actually moving. So it's walking with nothing in my ears. And that's when I actually get to check in with myself. And that's what works for me. And I think that's helpful for
mhm.
people who feel discomfort in just sitting. That can be a good step because you
Oh,
feel like you're in
absolutely.
motion, but I
Yep.
agree with you, the silence is really key. In your work with women in midlife, what do you think the biggest barriers they come to you with are for achieving that consistency?
Um, I think it's a few things. I think it's what we just talked about, which is kind of the lack of self-awareness.
Yeah.
They're not making time to be self-aware. And so they're kind of flailing about looking for the opinions of others and looking for these protocols that are going to magically overhaul their life. Um, I would also say the way that we organize our lives. So we tend
Mm,
to set the bar really high.
yeah.
We're going to do all things for all people every day. And we're just going to somehow find time to take care of ourselves. And that never happens, right? We just keep pushing
Mm,
our own self care off the to do list. So we aren't organizing our days to include ourselves necessarily, or it is including us. But it's not honoring maybe like the resource availability for the day. So
yeah.
maybe you didn't sleep well last night and you scheduled like an hour-long really aggressive workout for the day,
Mm,
and that doesn't line up. And
yeah.
so we're kind of organizing ourselves in a way that doesn't really make sense. And also I would say this, it doesn't honor the nervous system. So the nervous
Mm,
system is meant to oscillate through the day, go through periods of focus, intensity, work, and periods of resting and restoring and decompressing. But man, most women I work with do not live their life that way. They live it on this escalating scale of stress to the point that at the end of the day, they just want to tap out, right? They
yeah.
just want to sit down with their favorite Netflix show with some kind of, something that's going to soothe them in a way that just alters their chemistry, whether that's food or it's alcohol.
Yeah.
And that's not going to bode well for our health in the long run. So,
Yeah.
how can we actually organize our day in a way that is kind of really honoring the nervous system, giving ourselves moments to push, periods of time to push, but also intentionally giving ourselves periods to pull back and not
Mm.
push as hard?
Yeah, I think what I love that you said there is that we are designed to push at certain points. This is
Of
not
course.
about, sitting back and, just sitting in yoga, position, lotus position for 24 hours of the day. It's around having those moments of high, but then allowing those moments of rest in between. And I think that's really important because like anything with the internet, extremes get attention. And so I think sometimes we can think, well, if we're not hustling, then we're not doing anything. But it's just about exactly like you said, oscillating between high intensity and low intensity. And, athletes do this, right? They don't operate at their full intensity all the time. They incorporate rest and recuperation as well. And so, if we want to perform well, then it's important that we rest as well.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? Like we delude ourselves into thinking that if I just keep pushing, I'm
Mm,
somehow going to be more productive, but the opposite is true.
yeah.
You keep pushing and that's how you break.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it has an expiry date. There's an expiry date to being able to push. You can't do it forever. I want to talk a little bit about perfectionism because it often hides in, I'll do this right or I'll not do it at all, right? Oh, I'll start
Mhm.
on Monday because the conditions aren't perfect today on a Thursday, for example. How do you help people push past that perfectionism?
Well, first of all, I always remind people that perfectionism is, in my view as a coach, it's a hiding habit. It's a really
Mm,
easy thing to rationalize to almost avoid the work. If I can't do it
yeah.
perfectly, well, I just won't do it at all. Well, how convenient, right?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
can literally live our whole life that way. Well, it's because I want to do it so perfectly that I'm not actually doing anything.
Mm,
So I often kind of joke that perfectionism is for scared people,
yeah.
because it's just a really easy rationalization to hide behind. So the truth is, and I think we all fundamentally know this on some level, change and growth and expansion is messy. It's just messy
Mm,
business. But that's not how it's sold because on Instagram, it's like this picture perfect thing. It's this,
yeah.
I tried it one time and I got it right and I made $20 million, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Everyone's millionaires.
exactly. No one's showing us really the mess. And the
Yeah.
truth is, humans are just very messy, and behavior change is very messy. And going after the things we want for our life, it is messy business. And
Mm,
so recognizing that it's your willingness to rumble with failure and
yeah.
disappointment and imperfection that actually creates progress.
Yes. How do you
And
get people to get over that, right? Because that's really hard. As someone, particularly a high achieving, high performing woman who might have continued to climb the career ladder, be really successful, they might be really successful in one part of their life, but when it comes to health, they've sort of struggled or they've had that start stop or they've had progress and then sort of pulled back. How do you help people overcome like how do you get them to be like, well, yes, you've done really well in your work, but you're going to have to accept the messiness here.
yeah. Well, I think it's a couple of things. Like number 1, I find that most high achieving women are committing to way too much when it comes to their health and wellness, right?
Mm,
They want to do the hour morning routine and they want to, start the day with organizing their schedule perfectly and then doing their workout and having their cup of tea. And so by 9 a.m. they've already failed
yeah.
because they kind of set themselves up for failure. And so, one of
Yes.
the things that I feel like I do a lot of coaching around is really helping them to scale back on
Mm,
what the commitment is. And I'll tell you, most people fight me on it because they'll say, but I've done hard things before and I know I can do all of this. Okay, but are you? Are
yeah.
you doing all of these things now well? And of course, the answer is no, because that's why
Mm,
they hired me, right? They're struggling to be consistent. And so I think when they hear themselves say that, like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I have evidence in the past I can do a lot of things, but right now I'm struggling to do any of these things.
yeah.
So why not scale back, commit to less to prove to yourself that you actually can do some of these things
Mm,
well? And then we can stack more in.
yeah.
Like, I always say that I think people who are willing to start with less of a commitment are more serious about success.
Yeah, I agree with you actually there because it drops the ego out of it, right? And they really
Yeah.
want to actually get change rather than what massive change looks like, if that makes sense. They're more concerned about getting the change than what it looks like on the outside. I also love
Yeah.
what you said about stacking the proof. I talk a lot about proof points, and the more proof points we have, the more confidence we build. Do you encourage people to write those down or just sort of notice them in your work?
So I encourage women to keep what I call a victory log, which is
Mm,
because we're so awesome as women at really recognizing where we screwed up, where we
yeah.
fell short, where we could do better. And it's like, okay, so can we actually celebrate the rises first? So on my group coaching calls, I this is actually a rule that if people want to be coached, they have to start with where they're winning, what they're
Mm,
celebrating, what they're doing well. And after
yeah.
they've shared at least one of those things, then they can go into where the rumble is, where the
Yeah.
stuckness is, the confusion, the hardship, those things. But a victory log is at the end of the day, like just giving yourself maybe 3 to 5 points throughout the
Mm,
day that you're just proud of. You feel
yeah.
good about. And the other piece of that I think makes it a little bit more fun and challenging is to not write the same things every day.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that, isn't it? You're just like, "Oh, it's the same thing. Oh, I did that again,"
Right. Like, I woke up this morning and I wake up
Yeah.
every day, and it's like, "Okay, let's reach a little further."
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is some science, Courtney, actually around the smaller thing that you find the gratitude or the victory in actually has a better impact on you, than the huge things, It's actually the small things that have the big impact.
Yeah, I believe that. There's a great book by an architect, and I cannot think of the name. I had her on my podcast years ago. Ingrid Fattel Lee is her name, but I can't remember the title of her book. But the reason I'm sharing this is she talks about joy spotting. And joy
Mm,
spotting is going through your day, looking for the things that put more life into your life.
mm,
Right, and that could be visually just, walking down a nature trail and seeing a beautiful tree or hearing the birds chirp or feeling the grass on your feet. I mean, it could be anything, but as the more we joy spot,
yeah,
I truly believe the healthier and happier we are, um, because we are literally looking for the things that infuse our life with more life. It's not just nutrition, and it's not just exercise. There's a
yeah.
million more things that feed our inner landscape.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, our brains are trained to look for danger because that's what keeps us safe as
Sure.
human beings. And so to flip that and say, how do we look for joy and proactively do that, I think is a wonderful tip for sure. Are there any habits or rituals or thinking prompts that you use to help people sort of get through this period, so this mid season of life for women? And the reason I ask that is because what often happens, I find, is the things that worked for health and well-being and happiness sort of in your 20s and 30s are different to your 40s and
Mhm.
50s. Like I look back to myself and I would run marathons and do sort of high intensity interval training, and all of that stuff worked in essence. And then sort of
Yeah.
as you come into your 40s, it feels like it's just adding more stress to our bodies and our lives. So, what are
Yeah.
some of the habits or tips that you sort of talk to this demographic about?
Well, first of all, let's talk about just for the listener a little bit about the science behind why that happens at midlife. We
Mm,
do kind of feel like our capacity for stress is diminishing a little bit because it
yeah, I
actually
feel
is.
that. Yeah.
And it is because when we lose estrogen and progesterone, those two hormones help us to mitigate cortisol. So
Mm,
when they're leaving the party, we're not as good chemically at managing stress. And the other
mm,
really interesting thing and really frustrating thing is we also at midlife happen to be living the most stressful time of our life because we have
yes.
so many responsibilities and so many things that we have built into our life that are taking time and energy. So we're living at a time with more stress than ever, with the least amount of hormones on board that help us to manage that stress.
This seems
That's why
outrageous.
midlife it's out yeah. So here's the thing, and this is gonna again, it's gonna feel sound overly simplistic. But the very simple equation to improving health at midlife is twofold. Number 1, we remove unnecessary stressors. And I'm not saying
Mm,
all of them. I'm just saying if you start to unpack some of your unnecessary stress in your life, you will cell to soul start to improve your health.
mm,
And what I mean by unnecessary stress is stress that has no benefit on the other side.
yeah.
So, playing the compare and despair game, right?
Mm,
With all the social media highlight reels that you're looking at. There's no benefit to that. It just makes you feel like crap. And when you
yeah.
feel like crap, you want to eat crap, right? So it's not helpful. Not having boundaries. That's
Mm,
unnecessary stress. It's not benefiting you in any way.
yeah.
Not in the long term. Eating a lot of food that makes your body have to work harder rather than
Mm,
less hard. That's a lot of unnecessary stress. So we're kind of we're told in the midlife health equation that again to really focus on the food and the exercise piece, and I'm not arguing that. I think they're very important elements.
yeah.
But what I want the listener to hear is removing any unnecessary stress from your life is going to improve your
Mm,
health.
yeah.
And that could be going to bed 20 minutes earlier. It could be
Mm,
taking a walk for 20 minutes at lunch every day.
yeah.
It could be shutting off your computer screen at 5 p.m. at night, right? There's so many things that could help reduce that total load of stress.
Yeah.
The other part of the equation is we have to start leaning into intentional stressors on purpose, things that make us more resilient, because
Mm,
we're losing resiliency at midlife. So,
yeah.
how do we fortify our systems to become more robust. And this would be things like strength training. Maybe it's
Mm,
starting some hormone replacement therapy if that's an option for you. Maybe
yeah.
it's having some difficult conversations, changing careers. It could be 1,000 things.
Yeah.
But this is stress. It's eustress, that's what it's called, but it's a
Yeah.
positive type of stress. It helps us to grow and expand and become healthier. So we want to reduce unnecessary stressors and we want to start leaning into more stressors that amplify us. It has to be
Mm.
those two things almost simultaneously because we can't just be dumping more stress into our life. We know that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I really love that delineation between good stress and bad stress as well, because there's a couple of things in this. I think we as humans, I'd love your take on this. I think in this day and age, it's almost like we glorify or we're addicted to that stress
Ugh, I
because
know.
you're successful if you are stressed. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think, Angie, honestly, I was stuck in that for years where people would say,
Yeah,
"How are you?" I'm just so stressed. I just have so much going on. I'm so overwhelmed. Life is so
yeah.
full, right? I mean, I can so easily fall back into that. And
Mm,
honestly, living there is a choice.
yes.
It's a choice. And I'm not saying that everything in your life that is stressful is a choice, but the way that you perceive your life and the way that you're
Mm,
managing or not managing stress is a choice.
yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's really I feel like the work that I do is I help women to just better manage their stress load because
Yeah.
they have I always think of like, we have the proverbial bucket of stress and there's only so much stress that can fit in the bucket before it starts to overflow. But at midlife, the bucket itself is starting to lose integrity, the bucket being our bodies,
Yeah.
right? So the bucket's starting to get some holes in it and it's a little flimsy and it's struggling a little bit. So how can we fortify the bucket to carry the stress better?
Yeah, and that's where the intentional stress comes in, I'd imagine. That intentional stress, it's funny, me and my husband do one hard thing every year, like one really big hard thing.
Ooh,
So,
I love
uh,
that.
this this year we ran an ultra marathon, so physically stressful, but it's
Yeah.
one hard thing that I felt like more than anything made my brain more resilient.
Yeah.
Next year, I wanna learn piano, so not a physical stress.
Ooh,
So and I think those sorts of things because I do agree with you. I think it's weird. It's like I don't know how to articulate this effectively. It's like the comfort. We're so comfortable, but those comforts are adding unnecessary dull stress to our life, like too much Netflix, like takeaway, like those sorts of things that are comfortable, but they're adding stress to our bodies. And what we really need is that, like you said, that purposeful stress to build resilience.
yes. Have you ever read the book, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter?
Do you know what? I haven't, but I have. It keeps
Brilliant.
popping up for me, and I'm feeling like I need to read it.
You will so appreciate it, especially in this context, because it's exactly what he speaks to, that the
Mm,
comfort crisis is life yes, we're living in difficult times, but in terms of like comfort, we're almost too comfortable. Everything is on the
mm,
computer. We don't
yeah,
necessarily have to move our bodies if we don't want to. We can get everything
mm,
delivered to the front door. We don't have to challenge ourselves, and that's killing us.
yeah,
We don't have to forage for food. We don't have to exercise if we don't want to. We don't have to make difficult decisions if we choose not to. And that is literally creating disease in the human body. And
mm,
so it's like there's a time and a place for decompression, but I do think there is a reality and a very big consequence to too much comfort.
yeah, yeah. And it's almost like that comfort actually adds low level stress to our body, and
Yeah,
not helpful stress.
it's so true. It breaks us down.
Yeah, absolutely. So fascinating. I actually read something the other day that today we are walking or moving 7 to 10 kilometers, different for the US. I think that's about like 4 or 5 miles a day
Yep.
less than 1970.
In terms of like a week or how a
A
day,
day.
what?
A
Oh my
day.
word. Oh
Yeah.
my word. I believe that. I mean, that
Yeah.
it's a startling statistic, but it also makes perfect sense because people
Yeah.
aren't moving.
Yeah.
And here's it seems crazy, but movement is literally an intentional stressor. And it's crazy that we even have to think about it that way anymore because we used to have to move to live, to hunt for
Yes.
food, to procreate, to like keep humanity alive. And now we kind of have this luxury of not moving at all.
Yeah.
And there's a Disney movie, Wall-E. I don't know if you
Oh,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, it was, like, very telling. I mean, this was years ago that it came out, but it was all about, humans living in outer space, and they became so overweight because they were just refusing to move at all, and so they were
Mm.
moving around in those automatic chairs,
Yeah.
and I remember watching it thinking, "This is where we're headed."
Yeah.
If people refuse to lean into the discomfort of intentional movement, because let's face it, it's easier to sit on your couch than it is to go for a walk. It just
Of
is.
course. Yeah.
So there's intentional effort there. It's not a ton of effort, but it's a little effort.
Yeah.
And we're losing that drive and that desire and that hunger because we don't have to.
Mm. Yeah. I'd love to ask you, and this is a bit of a rogue question, but how do you think about that in terms of AI as well? Because I
Yeah.
think we are also outsourcing difficult decisions, difficult emails to write, difficult conversations to AI. People are using it as a way to say, hey, I have to have this conversation. What should I say? Rather than sort of working through it in your mind. I'd love just to know your thoughts on that.
I mean, I feel like I have two different opinions on it. Like number one, I'm right there with you. Like I think that there is definitely a huge downside to this, and I worry about it too because I have a 16-year-old son, and I worry
Mm,
about his creativity and his ability to think
yeah.
for himself, and all of that is concerning to me. I worry about the arts in general, if we're just feeding
Mm,
AI with everything, what happens to photographers? What happens to, like,
yeah,
real talent?
yeah,
So that is definitely one side of it. The other side is as a business owner, and you know firsthand what it's like to be, especially an online business owner. It's not just starting a business. All of a sudden, you're having to like take on 14 different careers at once.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
all of a sudden the podcaster, the marketer, the social media manager, the coach, the website builder, all the things. And for me, being online now for what, almost 15, 16 years, it never has stopped being overwhelming because also
yeah,
technology is always changing. So I will admit there is a little bit of relief in
yeah,
that AI is allowing me to outsource some things that I never wanted to take on.
yes,
And that opens up time, energy, and resources for the things that I really do feel like I'm good at and that I want to
yeah,
be spending my time on. So I'm not really sure. I think I'm in the middle in
yeah,
terms of I see the downside and I see the upside. And I feel like that in general about technology,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's
I
so much beauty.
I agree. I agree. And I think, it can empower people to move as well, right? Or for people who don't have the means to employ someone, hire someone for nutrition advice or movement advice, things like AI can actually give you a really great starting point to start to understand something as well. But I think,
That's a great point.
yeah, yeah, I think it's got, like anything, it's got pros and cons, right?
It's true, but as an idea generator, like even for like clients around food, I was having a conversation the other day where she was saying, "Oh, I just struggle with protein, and have like keeping it interesting because
Yeah,
I struggle to get enough in." And I told her, I'm like, "Chat GPT that." Like ask
yeah,
it to give you 20 different ideas based on, three different ingredients and it will.
yeah,
And I think for that it can be really helpful. Um,
absolutely.
but asking it to do all of your thinking for you, my husband always says, "It's not the tool, it's the way it's being used."
For sure.
That's
Yeah,
the problem. And I agree with that, even with AI. It's not that AI is a problem, it's that any tool can be abused and misused.
for sure. Yeah, I
And
think that's a really good delineation, and using it for benefit, like you said, as a business owner or helping with ideas
yeah,
is great. And then just making sure we're not outsourcing our thinking so that we're continuing to develop doing hard things and our resilience in the same way
yeah.
is really important. I want
It's
to
like
talk a little bit. Oh, sorry,
I was
you
I
go.
was just gonna say, like, it's the dosage, like, what's the
Mm,
it's the same with people will say to me, "Oh, I never eat sugar, I never," and if that works for you, that's great, but I don't think that sugar is the problem, I think it's the dose of the sugar,
yes.
and it's the
Yeah.
reason you're eating sugar. It's like, there's more behind it, and so I think that again, it goes into any tool.
Yeah, there's a saying about that. I don't know what it is. It's something about it's not the poison, it's the dosage or something like that.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, absolutely right. I want to talk a little bit about your book, The Consistency Code. I'd love to know your why for writing this book. What made you decide to write it?
So, a couple of things. Like, number 1, I was really struggling to find communities of women that wanted to have a conversation about health and well-being that was bigger than diet and exercise, because when
Mm,
I was, and I know it's changing now, I feel like more people are having this conversation, but a few years ago, and certainly in my younger years, every time I gathered with women, they wanted to talk about the most recent diet they were on, or what new
mm,
exercise program they signed up for, or, the fact that they could fit in their size 6 pants now that the holidays, it was just all of those conversations, and I really just felt a hunger to talk about life, like, how is my
mm,
life actually creating stress on my body? And how can I, normalize that in a group of women? And I couldn't
yeah.
find those communities. And I was a trainer, and I was very wrapped up in the fat loss world for a very long time. I had a, really successful career in that. But I felt like I had to create the community. I had to create a
Mm,
community of women that really wanted to have conversations outside of just diet and exercise. And as I built that community, that's kind of where the consistency code was born, was
yeah.
really starting to understand that, okay, hang on a second. The wellness industry has largely sold us this idea that we need protocols and cookie cutter programs.
Mm,
But the truth is, for sustainable outcomes and for deep health, we need self leadership skills.
yeah.
And so those are 2 very different things. Self-leadership skills and cookie cutter programs are not the same thing,
Mm,
right? A cookie cutter program is telling you what to do
yeah.
based on someone else's knowledge. But self-leadership is tuning into yourself, like we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast,
Mm,
and learning how to make decisions that keep moving you in the direction of health based on your unique circumstances. And so that's really like the 4 key practices that I teach inside this book are, um, are kind of what I came to really understand, like, the foundation of self-leadership even is. So, yes, self-awareness, yes, organization, which we talked about, but then also follow through. Follow through is where I do most
mm,
of my coaching. You can
yeah.
have the best, most beautiful planner in the world. Women do this every January, right? They buy the new
Yeah.
planner, the color-coded markers, the stickers, all the things. They spend a week organizing, and then as a coach, I'll check in with them a few days later, and they're not following through with anything on the plan.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yep.
"Okay, hang on a second. Like, what's the point if you're not gonna
Yep.
follow through?" So follow through, I really kind of I've talked about the nervous system a little bit in that, but I talk a lot about parenting your brain, like becoming
Mm,
your own coach. Because a lot of the things that we schedule for ourselves in the day, we're going to have resistance to. Exercise
yeah.
isn't always fun. Cooking a healthy meal versus ordering pizza isn't always the thing you wanna do.
Yep.
So, how do we still follow through despite resistance or despite not feeling like doing the work? And that largely comes down
Mm,
to being your own coach, like being able to really pivot your mindset and remember why you put it on your damn schedule to begin with. Um,
yeah.
and then also our capacity to feel emotion, because changing our lives, improving our lives, optimizing our lives, if you want to use that word, um, it demands that we feel hard things. Like, we're going to
Mm,
feel discomfort, we're going to feel resistance, we're going to feel frustration. Can you be with those emotions without doing things that harm your health? Like pouring a
yes.
glass of wine or eating more sugar or self deprecating or a million other things, right? How can you be with the full spectrum of human emotion without doing things that harm your health?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the final piece of the code is really just realignment, because life is going to pitch you 1,000 curveballs. Sometimes it's going to throw you 10 different curveballs in a day.
Mm,
And if you use every curveball as rationale for why you can't take care of yourself, you'll never take care of yourself.
yeah. Yep.
And so, how do we face the curveballs, navigate the curveballs, and pivot ourselves back in the direction we intended to travel in without getting lost in the weeds for months or years.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what a lot of women do. They go hard for a few weeks, and most wellness programs are built this way. You go hard for a
Yeah.
few weeks, and then you pull off, and you're out for 6 months to 6 years.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
And
"Oh,
you
I
see
really should do
results.
Whole30 again." It's
Yeah,
like, "Oh, stop."
it's so true, and you see results, right? So you might do the 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you see results, and then you take your foot off the
Yeah,
gas, and then
yeah.
you're like, "Oh, no."
Yes. Yeah, and so, I always use the analogy of a campfire. Like, when you initially start a campfire, it's a lot of work. You gotta go collect the wood, you've gotta, get the right amount of wind, you gotta have your match out. Sometimes you gotta use 10 different matches to get the first spark. But eventually, once the fire gets going, all you have to do is toss in a log every once in a while when you see it start to
Yeah.
die down.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing about behavior change. If you can catch yourself sooner that you're starting to get misaligned, and I would encourage everyone listening to this podcast today to really consider, what are your cues of misalignment?
Mm.
Because mine are reactivity. I become
Yeah.
very problem focused rather than solution focused. I want to eat
Yeah.
sugar. I want to drink alcohol. Like, I know what my cues of misalignment are.
Yeah.
So when I start seeing those behaviors show up in my life, that's a cue that my fire's dying down. And I
Mm.
better throw in a log, or I'm going to have a lot more work ahead of me.
What's an example of a log, Courtney? What would be an example of a log to throw
Yeah.
on that
So
fire?
my law, I call them anchors, but
Yeah.
logs are anchors. They're the things
Yeah.
that kind of help you to pivot back fast. And I'll tell you, I feel like the first one is kind of universal. There is nothing that a good night's sleep can't help soften
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
all humans. And so I always tell my clients, if you don't know what your anchors are yet, just take your rest very seriously for the next couple days and see what
Mm.
that shifts for you.
Yeah.
And within 48 hours, if they've taken it seriously, they can be a completely different person.
For sure. Yeah. Because I do think tiredness, I agree. Even I find in myself, when I'm feeling tired or underslept,
Yeah.
immediately I'll feel hungrier. Immediately I'll make poorer decisions on what I eat.
Yeah.
And I'll default to wasting time scrolling, being less focused, trying to distract myself. Those are
Mhm.
my sort of triggers to know that the fire's dying down.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say another anchor for a lot, for I know for me and for a lot of clients, because I have this conversation a lot, is when a client has kind of veered away from organizing their day. Like, they're not putting
Mm,
forethought into how they want to show up for the day, so the day
yeah.
just lives them versus them
Hmm.
living the day.
Yeah.
And so sometimes just taking 5 or 10 minutes at the start of your day to align yourself with how you want to show up, that can create a raging fire again.
Yeah.
So it's not big things. They're just little things that when you commit to them, you know that you feel more resilient. You feel like you're going to
Mm.
have a better day. You feel like you're more likely to show up for yourself. And they're a little bit different for everybody, but there are a few that definitely I think work for almost everybody.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that self-awareness and self-leadership, like you said, is noticing them and clocking them before you're 5 weeks into realizing that you're getting bad sleep, you've defaulted to takeaway, you've defaulted to scrolling and Netflix and wine and whatever it is, but
Yeah.
early intervention, but self-intervention.
Yes, I love that self-intervention. It says exactly what it is. Because how often do we hear, and we've all been there. I've been there certainly, where you hear yourself say, "How did I get here?" Well, it's
Yeah.
no mystery,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
you know how you got there. Yeah.
yes, it
Yeah.
was a series of choices where, and maybe you weren't awake to your choices because you had some major stress happening in your
Mhm.
life and something else. Like, there's a lot of reasons. There's no point in beating yourself up when you find
Yeah.
yourself misaligned. It's like, can you meet yourself there with grace? Because
Mm.
you will get realigned so much faster if you meet yourself there with grace.
I think that's such a beautiful point, Courtney, because very often, and I'm guilty of it, I'm very hard on myself. If I sort of, fall off my good habits or whatever that is, I can be very hard on myself. Why did I do that? Just sort your shit
Right.
out, get back on. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that just adds more stress rather than saying, okay, this is where I'm at. What am I going to do to turn it around? You're going to get to the same outcome, but without the additional stress.
Well, and think about it. You're already stressed because you're already
Mm,
like, failing or you're disappointing yourself in some way. So then you start this really negative self narrative and all this judgment comes in, which makes you
mm,
feel worse. And then what do we want to do? We just want to self soothe because our nervous
yeah.
system is so tapped. And so that's where we
Mm,
start reaching for things that are going to have major health consequences. And we're in control of that because if I
yeah.
just didn't add the additional stress, I could have solved this. And I know that you have intelligent listeners and everyone's probably heard this to some degree before, but I don't think we can hear it enough. You cannot be curious and judgmental at the same time.
Mm,
So you can choose to judge yourself, but it's not going to lead to anything good.
yeah.
What is way more productive is if you can just apply curiosity, like, oh, isn't it
Mm,
interesting that every time I get off the phone with that person, I want to go pour a glass of wine?
mm,
Right? Or isn't it interesting that every day when I have that 6 a.m. walk scheduled for myself, I start scrolling on social media?
yeah.
Right? So we have to bring an energy of curiosity versus judgment because curiosity just feels better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I
And
wonder
it's
why I did that.
yeah, and it's not sweeping it under the rug either. You're still acknowledging it.
Yeah.
It's just in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So isn't it interesting is a phrase I constantly offer my clients.
It's
Isn't it
so good.
interesting? It's because it
Yeah.
is. It's interesting. It's fascinating.
Yeah. You're just inviting curiosity. And I think when you invite curiosity, you also invite yourself to look a little bit more inwards and understand, okay, what's underneath this? It's not the top level behavior is just the symptom, right? What's actually underneath it?
Yeah, I always say it's not the what, it's the why. Like,
Yeah.
because we're so hyper focused in the wellness culture, like what supplement, what amount of exercise, what kind of exercise, what food, what diet dogma, right? What exercise outfit. Like, it's
Yeah.
always the
Yeah.
what. But what I'm interested in as a coach is why. Why are you
Mm,
eating the way you're eating? Why are you
yeah.
doing this form of exercise? Why do you talk to yourself this way? Because the
Mm,
why is really kind of it's the reason for everything, right? It's the
yeah.
real driver of how we feel. So if we can if we can make sure that we like our why,
Mm,
we're probably going to feel a lot better about our lives and we're probably going to take better care of ourselves because of it.
yeah.
So I think the why we do anything is really everything.
Yeah, there's a book and it's not in relation to health, it's in relation to
Yeah.
leadership. Simon Sinek, Start with the
Oh yeah.
Why.
Yes.
But I think that's good for self-leadership as well, why are we doing the things we're doing? Why is it important to you to look after your well-being or
Yeah.
feel good? Thinking outside of ourselves sometimes, why do we want to show up the best we can? And so I think that's a really sage point. I want to just touch on one last thing, and I touched on it in the introduction, but you refer to midlife as a woman's power years
Yes.
rather than a period of decline or anything like that. Can you talk to me about that and sort of how you arrived at that?
Yeah. So, power to me is what is really at the end of the day what health is all about, right? Because power is how much life is in your life. It's almost like your
Mm,
vitality barometer.
yeah.
And power is, I think it's interesting when we talk about women and power, we don't use the word power, we use the word empowerment. Why? Why do we do
Mm,
that? Like, power is your ability to solve problems. Power is your ability to have your own back. Power is your decision making, your creativity,
mm,
right? It's like it's a beautiful thing, but I think a lot of women have maybe thought of power in their lifetime as power over, like someone having power over them
yeah.
or power being like this really dominant, aggressive thing. And I think true power is such a grace-filled act. And it
Mm,
circles back to kind of where we started with that consistent self-honoring. You will
yeah.
never have true power if you aren't radically honest with yourself and if you are not consistently self honoring, whatever that
Mm,
means for you, because self honoring is what allows you to come alive. It's
yeah.
what allows you to show up for all the people and in all the spaces and places in the best possible way.
Mm,
And without it, there's I talk in the book a lot about integrity pain. And integrity pain is just that very real internal friction that we feel when we're living our life misaligned from how we want to be living.
yeah.
And if we can reduce the amount of integrity pain in our life, we feel so much more powerful.
Mm,
But it requires sacrifice because, like, for you to do your marathon this year, you had to sacrifice a lot of things.
yeah.
You had to lean into a lot of discomfort. You had to do it on days you didn't want to do it. right?
Yep.
You had to do your training on days you didn't wanna do it, and so I think it's kind of a reckoning with ourselves of
Mm,
when are the moments to be graceful, when are the moments to be a little more gritty and disciplined, um, and it's not a perfect science, it requires some experimenting with
yep.
yourself in order to find, like, what really does help you to generate more life into your life, and that's what power is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's so interesting, isn't it? It can be a really challenging time going through this sort of period of midlife, but I think also empowering in a sense that I don't know about you, Courtney, but I certainly find I just give less of a shit about what people think. I'm
Right.
really like clear on sort of who I am and do you know what I mean? So I think there is real benefit to being in this period of our lives as well. I think it's not all doom and gloom, you know?
It totally is, and it's also it's the power years because we have less tolerance. We
Yeah.
have less resources. We understand ourselves a bit better. We
Mm,
understand life a bit better, and so we can start making better decisions from all of those places.
yeah.
And so I really think that, I always say that midlife is an invitation. It's an invitation to either keep doing what you're doing, which does not bode well for a lot of because a lot of women are
Mm,
like skidding into midlife, like in a full
yeah.
face plant, and wondering why, oh, my body's just abandoning me. My body is, betraying me. And it's like, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
You've been betraying yourself in some way, which is why your body is struggling to show up with the energy and resources that you want it to have.
Yeah.
So let's just take ownership of that and start to
Mm,
fuel the fire of where you can be taking more responsibility for
yeah.
reigniting yourself. And your body is so responsive.
Yeah.
You give it what it wants, man, is it responsive.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to have a bit of patience as well, I think, right? Sometimes people think, "Oh, I've done it for 3 days and I don't notice any difference."
And this is why I think that victory log that we talked about earlier is so important, because if you're
Mm,
not acknowledging the goodness of the day and where you
yeah.
showed up in ways that you're proud and you're only focused on the outcome, you will burn out so fast. You're just gonna get very
Yeah.
disinterested very quickly. Um, so it really is like, can you fall in love with the process versus the outcome, right? Can you
Mm,
really find ways to just enjoy the work rather than trying to find ways to cheat the work?
yeah.
Because 'Cause we're awesome
Absolutely.
at that. Man, we're awesome at that, cheating the
Yeah.
work.
For sure. And trying to get to the outcome and not thinking about the process. I mean, life and living is the process, right? It's not the outcome.
It totally and oh my gosh, like, my 10 years in fat loss, like, I helped a lot of women lose a lot of weight and completely, recomp their bodies, which was great until it wasn't. Because the pattern that I
Mm,
kept seeing was people doing all this work for a year, 18 months, and then slowly gain all their weight back.
mm,
Because they weren't really changing their beliefs about themselves. They weren't
yeah.
changing their relationships with the things in their life that were generating stress and helping them to unpack unnecessary stress. And so it really, I mean, that was a pivotal point in my career because I just
Mm,
realized, like, hang on a second. We're teaching people to reach for this outcome, but the truth is it's how they go about achieving the outcome that's everything.
yeah.
And so do you enjoy what you're doing to self-honor? And if you don't, you're probably not gonna do it for very long.
That's right. Find something else. Find
Yeah,
another way to achieve that.
yeah.
Yeah. I have loved talking to you today, Courtney. I feel uplifted and activated to do all of the things that we've spoken about. Is there one question that I haven't asked you that you wish I'd asked you today?
I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of ground. But
We
I would
did.
say this, I would have a question for the audience, which is just, you know, to really consider what health means to you at this age
Mm,
stage of your life, because I think so often we've just been given this definition of health, like it's the absence of disease or it's, what my data markers are telling me at my doctor's office.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, it can be those things for sure,
Mm,
but I'm willing to bet if you sat with it for a minute, your definition would be so much more expansive.
yeah.
And if you can really tap into how you think about health and what it really means to you, I bet you're going to feel more excited to do the things that move you
Mm,
in that direction. Because what I hear from my clients is, I just want to be able to get on the floor with my grandkids and mess around and go for hikes and travel the world for as long as I can. That's health.
yeah.
right?
Yep.
Doing my own grocery shopping and thinking for myself and living independently, that's health.
Mm,
And so, like, really going into the future of what is health going to look like at, 60, 70, 80, and beyond, that might get you a little bit more lit up than
yeah.
staying in the space of, oh, it's my cholesterol markers are here, or my weight is
Yeah.
this, or my body fat
Yeah.
percentage is this. So, yeah, what does health mean to you at this age and stage of life? I think is a really good question.
I think that's a wonderful question to leave us on because so many times it'll be what size dress am I wearing or what's
Yep.
my weight on the scale and
Sure.
all of those things really, I mean, they're fine to have as goals. I totally understand all of that. But at a bigger level, what is health for you and what does that look like? And I do think it's something that gives you a lighthouse to look towards that is much more motivational than sort of just necessarily a number.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have a vanity bone, right? We
Of
all wanna look good and we
course.
all yeah, of course we
Yeah.
wanna look, as good as we can. And the number of athletes and amazing physiqued women that I've worked with over the years who are a far cry from health are
Yeah.
many.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's a good delineation. And it's certainly, like you said, it's not to remove that little bit of vanity. That's fine. It's good
Totally
to
fine.
I like to dress nice and look good in my clothes as well. But it's about that bigger purpose as well. So I think it's a
Yeah.
wonderful question to leave us on. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find your book?
They can find it on all major book retailers. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes& and Noble. You can also just go to my website, theconsistencycode.com, and you'll see all the links for all the different major booksellers on there. But yeah, that's probably the best place to go.
Wonderful. Thank you again for your time, Courtney.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Ange Davis. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.